disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen.
Take a look at this. So, this was Fox News. This was the moment that it was announced Charlie Kirk was assassinated. They bring on Benjamin Netanyahu. We just showed previously how Bibi is still continuing to do this media kind of circle to try to, convince people of his innocence. And as I said, it's suspicious that a man in this position, that if you really were an innocent person, if you really had, no evidence for people to suspect, you would just go on with your life. This is a man who's supposedly in, the battle royale of civilization against Hamas, against Yemen, against, all these different countries that they're bombing simultaneously. Why is he deliberately going out of his way to go onto American media and social media to proclaim his innocence? Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that in the middle of a war zone? It just seems way too suspicious. And here's another take of this, is supposedly he had a letter from Charlie Kirk, and there was, communication back and forth. And the thing that just I find so suspicious is he's going to read the letter, but he's only going to read a portion of it. And if I was in a position where I'm trying to prove my innocence, would I not just release the full letter? Like, you have it in your hands right there. Why not read off the whole page? Or why not just publish the entire letter onto social media so that people can witness and see it and prove your innocence? But here's what went down.
He wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, "One of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization." A few weeks before the tragedy yesterday, I called him and I spoke to him and I said, "Please come to Israel." I invited him to Israel. And sadly, that visit will not take place. But he was a defender of our common Judeo-Christian civilization. He was unbelievably excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here. He valued our bond, the bond between America and Israel. He did so many things to
as we pointed out before, these invitations to Israel. It's not like you're winning the Showcase Showdown, The Price is Right. They're not inviting you to a luxury stay where you're staying in a resort and you get to try the food. You're not going on like an Anthony Bourdain or Phil Rosenthal experience. Benjamin Netanyahu, when he does these invitations to Israel, sounding more like a mobster inviting you to their club. Hey, you're going to come to my spot. We're going to sit down. We're just going to have a little chat. We're going to have a little discussion about you. Now, keep in mind, Charlie Kirk has been to Israel a few times. He's been vocal about his visits to Israel numerous times before. And for Benjamin Netanyahu to say, just weeks before the assassination, I invited him to Israel. Well, how convenient that was the same time that people, the donors of Turning Point USA, were starting to confront Charlie Kirk because he invited on Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson onto the event stage. He told this to Megyn Kelly. And Charlie Kirk was also getting tensions from these donors and from the state of Israel. Hence why Benjamin Netanyahu would try to reach out to Charlie Kirk and invite him to Israel. That, hey, we're going to have a sit down. You're a very influential guy. You said you support Israel. What's going on here? Why would you invite on Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith, a Jewish comedian, to Turning Point USA? Why would you bring on some very anti-Semitic, to use this term of phrase, voices onto the stage of Turning Point USA, where there's going to be young, impressionable Americans that are going to, psych into this. And again, you look at the polling, no one under the age of 40 it has support for Israel. People are starting to question it. People can see out in the open, when the IDF is committing their crimes and posting on social media. It's not going to stick well for people. Anyway, here's the rest of it.
Defend free speech. He had his truth. He stood up for it. But he said, you can come and debate me. He invited that debate. He certainly didn't invite the violence, the horrible violence that tried to silence him. And this is a worldwide problem. The people on the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use.
Yes, the radical Islamists pairing up with these transgender sexual orientation, LGBTQ furry people. Talk about a strange union there. I mean, you're talking about people that cover up their wives and women that just allowed women to drive recently in places like Saudi Arabia. Yeah, they're teaming up with the LGBTQ. They're teaming up with the transgender community. They're teaming up with drag queens. They're teaming up with people who are very open about their sexual orientation. Does that make sense to you? That does not make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to anybody. That's the most strangest union you can imagine. But I can imagine a foreign country like Israel and the Likud government. I can imagine that in partnership with, far-right America that stands by its, lobbyists and institutions that completely change the scope of the American public. I mean, right now, you're looking at what AIPAC is doing and who's being targeted. Look at the two politicians that are being the most targeted. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie. The two most predominant, very vocal, pro-American voices that, again, Charlie Kirk had conversations with. But it did not sit well with the donors. It did not sit well with the billionaire interests. It did not sit well with Benjamin Netanyahu, hence why he comes on to Fox News. Hence why he's doing all these media appearances, trying to denounce Israel, trying to cut off the connections before people start looking into things, before people start catching the receipts. But we're already witnessing it. Candace Owens has been doing reports on this. Max Blumenthal and Ayanna Priyapal on Gray Zone, they've done excellent work about this. Jackson Hinkle. So many people have looked into this.
Violence to try to take down their enemies, whether it's President Trump, who's been almost assassinated twice, or, they try to kill me here too. But they got Charlie Kirk, and it's just...
Again, more assassinations that haven't been disclosed. We still don't know what happened with Butler, Pennsylvania. We still don't know what happened with the second attempt on the golf course. Yeah. Just pile on all the disappointments that just absolutely disgust me about the FBI. Like, I don't believe a damn word any of these government agencies are telling us. I don't believe a damn word when they say, Venezuela is a threat to us now. Like, how many times have you tried to trick that before? How many times have you tried to overthrow the country? You had your henchman, Juan Guaido, tried to push in as the legitimate president. That did not work out. But, now we're angry at them because they're the ones bringing drugs. Give me a break. Give me a freaking break. After all the lies you've told us over the years, after how much you have dissipated against the American public, why would anyone believe their story? But you got to believe their story because otherwise it's hate speech. Here's where this gets a bit interesting because the Times of Israel, Israeli publications, they had their beef with Charlie Kirk. I'm surprised Benjamin Netanyahu does not mention this. So this is a blog from the Times of Israel that got published. And this was on September 11th, 2025. So this was the day after Charlie Kirk's death. And they published this blog saying Kirk's murder can't erase his anti-Semitism. Wait a second. Benjamin Netanyahu and all these other people were telling us that he is very vocal about Israel. He was, a supporter for the Jewish Christian faith. But here you have the publication of Israel denouncing Charlie Kirk and vilifying him as an anti-Semite. Charlie Kirk is an anti-Semite on Times of Israel. So it goes on to say, on the 10th of September 2025, Charlie Kirk was shot dead. It was a horrible murder, senseless, brutal, irrevocable. His death should never have happened. But grief doesn't erase complexity. Within hours of the news, I saw Jewish friends and acquaintances begin to lionize him, a true friend of the Jews, defender of Israel, warrior for our cause. I understand why. When someone who seems aligned with your values is struck down, there's an instinct to embrace that alignment, to praise publicly, to mourn tribally. Reading these eulogies worries me deeply because while empathy is essential, glossing over anti-Semitism because the speaker otherwise support us is morally bankrupt and dangerous. It suggests that Jewish safety, dignity, and moral clarity are cognate on whether the anti-Semitism comes from the other side. If he were a left-wing figure, would these same friends shout his praises so uncritically? If he had trafficked in similar demeaning tropes against Jews, would he excuse him, rationalize him, contextualize him away? I write this not to lay blame on any individual, but to insist that grief does not allow for toxic myth-making. We can mourn Kirk's death without making him a saint. We can feel sadness at human loss without excusing harm. I'm fully aware that this type of selective excusing of anti-Semitism is not a right-wing phenomenon. The left are equally as bad. To illustrate my point, I've created two case studies, one from the right and one from the left. So they're using Charlie Kirk and Hassan Piker. That's Cenk Uyghur's nephew. I examine these words, the Jewish responses to them, and then I run a reverse test. Would our response differ in the same of the other side? So on and so forth. So this is what he's claiming about Charlie Kirk. It says Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was a commanding voice among conservatives. He was young, bold, unafraid of culture wars. He aligned himself closely with pro-Israel rhetoric, presented himself as a defender of Jewish interests, and was admired by many for standing against what he called leftist elites, cultural Marxism, and threats to traditional American values. Then he starts going into the problematic statements. Here are a few instances that illustrate what I mean. Words that many Jewish people found unsettling, not despite Kirk's pro-Israel stances, but because of them. I include caveats where exact transcripts verification is incomplete. In some cases, we rely on watchdog organizations and secondary media accounts. Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. Reported by Media Matters, this kind of inversion is dangerous because it both projects and normalizes grievance in a way that mirrors classic anti-Semitic rhetoric. The number one funding mechanism of radical open border neoliberal quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits is Jewish donors. They control not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. So they're getting these from publications in which Charlie Kirk or someone close to Charlie Kirk has said. And because Charlie Kirk is a very influential person, they worry about this. They are deeply, deeply angered by the fact that Charlie Kirk would allow these voices. But again, Charlie Kirk is an American, and he's very, very much an advocate for free speech. He may disagree with these statements, but he allowed for that conversation. And he even stated that even people that not express the same views I view on Israel should be allowed to have the conversation. He said that openly. And just as when he was starting to conflict with his own interest and starting to look at things differently, he was evolving. That was even more problematic because the donors, predominantly pro-Israel billionaire donors like Bill Ackman, they don't want people like Tucker Carlson to be platformed. They don't want Dave Smith, a Jewish comedian, to have a voice. They don't want people to have these opinions, and they don't want Charlie Kirk to bring them a platform. Hence why this is a bit suspicious. This is another blog. So this is published in the Times of Israel as the Prime Minister is telling you what a great guy this man was, and oh, I feel so tragic, and how dare you point the finger at Israel? This guy, was a savior of ours. He's a saint. He's bringing the message of our, Judeo-Christian values and our ethics to the Western world. How dare you? Blah, blah, blah. At the same time, these are being published. The Wrong Kind of Friend, rethinking Charlie Kirk's support for Israel. This is September 13th. So, as Benjamin Netanyahu is making his rounds to try to cover up and make himself innocent, which, again, this very seems suspicious that you keep harping on it. These publications in the Israeli media, and I trust a bit of the Israeli media because the Israeli media does not hide. They don't hide. They don't try to twist the words around. They're very vocal and open about what they're doing, about what the IDF is stating, about their hatred for anyone that criticizes the Zionist prophecies. And clearly, Charlie Kirk hit a nerve with these guys. Hit a nerve with the country. Hit a nerve with Zionism. Hit a nerve with Jewish billionaire donors. So this is all part of the conversation that we need to have indefinitely. And you remember Benjamin Netanyahu was prime minister at the time 9/11 happened. I don't know a lot of people know that, but he was the prime minister at the time 9/11 happened. And this is from Haaretz. Again, another Israeli publication that stated that Benjamin Netanyahu says 9/11 terror attacks good for Israel. According to Ma'ariv, Netanyahu said Israel is benefiting from attack as it swung American public opinion. This was at the time of yet another horrific incident that happened in America, that Americans were grieving. They were trying to find answers. They were trying to, deal with their loved ones. Benjamin Netanyahu jumps on board to say what a great opportunity it is. And this is from Israeli media. This is right from the source. This is not Qatari funded. This is not some Arab publication. It's not even, Huffington Post. It's not even a left-wing publication. And it goes on to say the Israeli newspaper Ma'ariv on Wednesday reported that the Likud leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, told an audience at Bar Ilan University that the September 11th attacks had been beneficial for Israel. Quote, "We are benefiting from one thing, and that this is the attack on the Twin Towers in the Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq." Ma'ariv quote the former prime minister as saying, he reported adding that these events swung American opinion in our favor. So now you kind of understand why Benjamin Netanyahu had to go out of his way in the middle of a war with all these different areas, all these different countries that he's bombing, that he's, continuing the genocide in Gaza, that he says that Palestine existence will not exist, going out of his way to go right to American media, to go right onto social media, and try to denounce any involvement with Charlie Kirk's death in the most suspicious way possible. You are not proving your innocence, bud. You're not proving your innocence by doing this. And because we have these receipts, because people are sharing around all these different occurrences where Benjamin Netanyahu could be suspected of guilty, it's not helping the case. And you keep LARPing on this. You keep going on and harping every single point in turn. No, Israel had no involvement with this. Charlie Kirk was a great man. Charlie Kirk was an advocate for Israel. We put murals up instantaneously. We have nothing to do with this. As I stated, and I know it sounds like a broken record, but if you are innocent, you just go on your way. Have a good life. Why would you keep going on to the media trying to state your innocence over and over again if you are innocent? This doesn't make any sense. And why we're going to keep harping on this, why we are going to keep investigating, is because something stinks. Something definitely stinks. And this is part of the conversation. This is part of the investigation that we know the FBI is avoiding. And we know that other people have took the time to start digging into this. Again, a lot of people kind of avoiding the last 48 hours, the last, few days that Charlie Kirk was alive and what he stated when he was alive. That's kind of important. Just like how JFK, no one wants to talk about his last two speeches about dismantling the CIA and putting AIPAC and the Mossad as foreign agents. Those are very important speeches concerning his death. Just like it's important to know that Charlie Kirk was evolving before his death. Why we're putting all this together. Hey, here at Kitz Corner, we want to thank you, our viewers and our subscribers that tune into Kitz Corner for the latest dives in trending news, political conspiracies, and the craziest of stories. However, being in this business isn't an easy job. Because we're independent, we can dive into stories that the mainstream outlets are afraid to do so. But unfortunately, that doesn't give us the luxury of big advertising or government subsidies. That's why we reach out to you. You can support Kitz Corner and get some cool new threads in the process. Say what? That's right, check out our merch store, where we have a big selection of t-shirts, mugs, stickers, sweaters, bags, and more. All with interesting designs too, like this True North Strong and Free. So if you want to show off your support, go to our website at kitzcorner.net. That's kitzcorner.net. And click the store link at the top of the screen. Or you can scan the QR code provided on screen to get instant access to our merch store. Your support makes a huge difference at what we do here. So why not wear your support too? So go to kitzcorner.net or scan the QR code on your screen to get to our one-of-a-kind Kitz Corner merchandise store. Thank you, and on with the show.